Joe. Nice to meet you. My name is Nasha. Can you share a bit about your background, why you're here today?
Yes, I teach at Harvard and have for several decades, and I'm here today to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and that is transitions. Because what the data tells us is that we do a very, very poor job with transitions. By transitions, we mean going from a current state to a future desired state, whether it's personal or professional transitions, like from one job to another, or one relationship to another, or from being an employee to being a manager, or from being a manager to being an entrepreneur. So it's become a real area of concern because the data tells us that the failure rates occur during transitions.
From what I understand, there are a lot of common mistakes people make as well. Can you share what some of the common mistakes people make during these kind of transitions?
It's a great question. I think amongst the most common mistakes is that a transition or a change is necessarily good. There's nothing that's inherently good about change. Change simply means making something different. Perhaps we shouldn't be so interested in change, but rather positive change. How do we make something better? Also, leaders tend to think that their job is to help people become more comfortable with what is uncomfortable to them, which is change. And I really take a different perspective, and that is we need people to first be uncomfortable with making a change before actually deciding they should make it. Because one of the biggest things people don't think about as change is that it's not reversible in most cases. You can't leave one job for another and a few months later decide, I like my old job better and go back to it. You can't leave one marriage and a few months later say, I think I made a mistake. Can we get married again? And so there are lots of mistakes, but they're posed through the question, should I go or should I stay? And the challenge is that for many situations, they are too good to leave, but too bad to stay.
Do you have any advice for any individuals to stay adaptable during this kind of transition for both personal and also professional?
The issue of being adaptable is to understand that you can be very, very adaptable with what I've come to call first order changes. These are rules of thumb, heuristics. They don't matter that much. You've done them many times, you know how to do them. But with second order changes, which have enormous impact and consequences, the adaptability comes before you make the change. Being agile is deciding just because someone offers you a change opportunity doesn't mean you need to take it. You need to look before you leap. Because again, as I said earlier, with second order changes, you often cannot go back.
Can you share about what are some of the advice you have for people to ensure their successful transition, especially when there are a lot of high risk involved as well?
In terms of increasing the likelihood of success with the transition, it's really, if I'm very simple about it, it's doing your homework and not just jumping into it. A transition is an experiment. You've never done it before. You don't know what you don't know. We go into transitions knowing about 20%. The other 80% is discovery. I don't like those odds at all of 20% success. And so we've developed a series of worksheets and self-assessments to allow you to collect data, to gain insight, to do visioning before you make the transition, and quite possibly decide this is not a good transition for me now. The best time to make a transition is when you don't have to. The best time to think about a new job is when you're happy in your current job. So the idea of transitioning is that we don't need to make it, but you need to give yourself permission. You need to give yourself the luxury to do the necessary evaluation using the kinds of self-assessment instruments I shared with the participants today before you make a decision like that.